Hello and welcome back to Continental Club Extra. Today we are going to be reacting to Senegal versus the Netherlands, and across Football Daily and Euro Football Daily throughout this World Cup we're going to be reacting to pretty much every game. Tonight for your viewing pleasure I've got Michael McCubbin, I've got Chris Hamill. As I said, we're going to be reacting to Netherlands 2, Senegal 0. Chris, not the best game, but one of the big talking points going into it was Cody Gakpo. What did you make of his performance?
Well, first of all, I agree. Low quality game. I thought Senegal deserved a point. I thought Frenkie de Jong was comfortably the best player on the pitch. But Gakpo will grab the headlines. And you know what? Who can begrudge him it? Breaking the deadlock, thankfully, mercifully, on his World Cup debut. And he might not have been at his best, because he's hit some pretty high highs this season, hasn't he? But super economic on the ball is my positive slant on this. So just 36 touches. That was fewer than Edouard Mendy. Put up 3 key passes in the process, only bettered by Ismail Assar, who I thought had a good game as well. Deserves a shout out there. 2 touches in the opposition's box, 1 shot, 1 goal. And like I said, when it went in, we were like, finally, there is a point to making this video. Get in there, Cody Gakpo. And if he does have a good tournament, say he gets 3-4 goals, it does feel like he's destined for the Premier League, or at least heavy Premier League interest once more come January, because he reportedly knocked back Leeds in the summer, didn't he? Southampton were heavily interested. Arsenal and Manchester United credited with an interest, but I'm not sure how concrete that was. But when you look at some of the numbers he's putting up in the Eredivisie and in the Europa League, you can see why people think he needs to level up, basically. It looks like he's kind of completed Dutch football at this point. 12 goals, 14 assists in 19 Eredivisie and Europa League appearances. Came to this World Cup facing huge expectations and has delivered, in a sense, by being a decisive figure in this game. Maybe not the Netherlands we thought we were going to get, because they were in really fine fettle in the Nations League, weren't they? And they topped a very difficult group. And Vincent Janssen started up front when we're used to seeing Depay lead the line, although not played a lot of football since like September, has he? Because he's been injured and played 132 minutes, in fact, this season for Barcelona. But he is their talisman, Depay. And in his absence, Cody Gakpo needed to step up and did. And now he's on everyone's timeline, and the sort of interest that Arsenal and Manchester United showed has re-emerged, and people are debating whether, you know, one of those sides should move from in the winter window. And I guess that's something we're going to open up on in this episode.
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely worth talking about, because as you say, pressure was on his shoulders. Also, maybe a little bit difficult to judge him given the quality of players around him as well. I don't think anyone was expecting Vincent Janssen to be leading the line at this year's World Cup. McCubbs, in terms of what you saw tonight and what you've seen throughout this season, it feels like Arsenal are probably, you know, they've been maybe more strongly linked to him than Man United. Do you think he'd be a good fit at Arsenal?
I mean, it's difficult to say, because I don't think he's not going to be a starter at Arsenal, that's for sure, isn't it? Like, I mean, Saka, Martinelli and Jesus are, you know, they're set in stone as the front 3. And I think it kind of comes down to how much Arsenal are willing to spend on a backup player. And a player who, Cody Gakpo, I think, you know, still has a pretty high ceiling, but at 23, 24 isn't necessarily the youngest compared to other players, you know, of his profile. But he has had a very impressive season. He's got 12 goals and 14 assists in 19 League and Europa League games. He had 3 goals in 9 games for the Netherlands going into the World Cup. And, you know, has 3.5 years left on his deal at PSV. So, you know, he's expected to cost upwards of £50 million, which is, you know, no small fee for an Arsenal side which are already on course to score 89 goals this season. So, I mean, yes, you know, Ødegaard's their top scorer. They don't have, like, you know, Jesus hasn't been the kind of target, well, not target man, but, you know, the prime goal scorer that people wanted, or at least he's not been putting away the chances. I expect in the second half of the season he will start scoring with more efficiency. But, you know, the player he's been kind of compared with most, or the other kind of target that has been mooted for Arsenal, has been Mykhailo Mudryk, who's obviously been a sensation for Shakhtar Donetsk this season. And in some ways, you know, Mudryk might be better value in that if he were to cost a similar amount, he is a bit younger. He offers something a little bit different, I think, in that he is just pure speed, crazy acceleration, whereas Gakpo, I think, is really well-rounded. He's, pretty quick, he's pretty skillful, he's pretty agile, but he's also got that kind of height, that physicality. We obviously saw that today. Edouard Mendy, terrible, but Gakpo to get ahead of the defence and leap for that ball, did show his aerial ability. And so I feel like Gakpo in some ways is maybe a good option to have as a bit of a backup in multiple areas, whereas I think Mudryk would be, a great backup for Martinelli. So it kind of depends where Arsenal are prioritising in that sense, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting you bring up Mudryk and his abilities as well, because, he's ranked or was clocked as the fastest player in the Champions League this year, and we saw him give Leipzig, Real Madrid, Celtic numerous problems.
Yes, we did.
Yes, we did indeed. And they still had a good chance to qualify until the final game, and then I think they lost quite heavily to RB Leipzig. I think it was 4-0. But for me, I wouldn't be going for a winger at all in January. I think Arsenal's weakest area of their squad is their backup to Thomas Partey. And we saw last year it sort of derailed their sort of top four challenge in the end. The only game they've lost in the Premier League this year was without Partey as well, against Man United. So I'd probably look for a backup defensive midfielder. As to who that could be, someone like Enzo Fernandez from Benfica. He's not really a defensive midfielder per se, he's more of a passer. And I think it'll be almost impossible to get him in January, but it's definitely worth having a look at. McCubs, let's touch on the Netherlands as a whole, because a lot of people had them down as sort of outsiders for the tournament. I don't think they were amongst anyone's favourites. Did anything from the game tonight sort of change your opinion on that?
Not massively. I mean, Chris touched upon it. Frankie de Jong, just a class act, isn't he? We've seen it all before, but he really was, especially in the first half. The only player on the pitch who was really putting in kind of world class display. I think also Ismaila Sarr, like Chris was saying, was Senegal's best player, and I think it's a shame because Sadio Mane, I think if he's in that team, I think there's just more chances open up there, isn't there? There's more space opened up, and I think Ismaila Sarr would have been even more dangerous, or would have opened up space for Mane. But c'est la vie, we can't talk about Mane this tournament, unfortunately. But yeah, as for the Netherlands, I think. Yeah, they had a couple of openings in the first half, didn't get a shot on. I think Frankie de Jong, squared it when he probably should have shot, didn't quite work out his feet in time. Denzel Dumfries, who I think has been, a very, important player for them, especially on the attacking end, and has been for Inter as well, I think, over the last 2 years. I think his threat was basically nullified by Diallo at left back. So yeah, it was a bit of a disappointing display, or a bit of a disappointing game from both perspectives, I think. And yeah, I think the Netherlands have a lot to work on in the next couple of games. And luckily, they are coming up against Qatar and Ecuador sides, who I think are less complete than Senegal, especially Qatar. And Van Gaal might have a bit of time to kind of experiment a little bit, bring in players like Teun Koopmeiners, Xavi Simons. Just see how this team works a little bit more in a tournament setting, because they went into this tournament unbeaten under Van Gaal. I think he'd won all but 4 of his games in charge going into this match. There is a team that can go deep in this tournament there, but there's growing to do, I think.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it was interesting seeing Noppert make his international debut for the Netherlands tonight. I don't think many people expected that. I think most people thought it would be the 39-year-old Pasveer from Ajax. He's obviously been pretty good for the last 18 months for them. But Noppert actually did, everything that was asked from him in those 2 dangerous moments, particularly from that Idrissa Gueye shot as well. But as you said, I'd love to see Koopmeiners grow into this tournament as well. Briefly touching on Senegal before we wrap up here as well. Slightly disappointing from them, I think, ultimately. I know it's difficult. Obviously, they're missing their talisman. I don't think any team is missing someone of the same calibre or importance their respective side than Mane at this World Cup. But you saw some defensive solidity in their game. I think they had 6 clean sheets in 8 games going into this. And that did carry into this game. As we say, Netherlands scored with their first shot on target. But it's going to be difficult for them. I mean, Chris, before we move on, you saw Ecuador-Qatar yesterday.
Yes.
Do you think Senegal beat both of those sides?
Perhaps. I mean, it might be a fairly even contest with Ecuador, given that they'll come into this game in a buoyant mood, positive frame of mind. Obviously, Enner Valencia, maybe the result is dependent on how fit he is, because we saw that he had to get hauled off sort of midway through the second half. I also think we've been quite kind to Mendy in this game, Edouard Mendy, because it wasn't just a howler for the first goal, it was a howler for the second one as well. And actually, when you take a look at the shots, Senegal had 15 to the Netherlands 10. I think the XG was in Senegal's favour as well, about 0.9 to 0.7. So they did enough, like I said at the start of the show, to get a point. I thought Chiarte was pretty useful as well before he got taken off through injury, and I hope that's not as serious as it first looked. But yeah, a little bit disappointed with the Netherlands because we sat down after a very one-sided contest with England and Iran, and we wanted to see two sort of juggernauts slug it out, and it was just very attritional, wasn't it? But yeah, let's be positive. I also just want to go back to the Cody Gakpo thing to Arsenal for a second, because at the start of the season, Arsenal were obviously heavily linked with Rafinha and wanting to pay between 40 and 50 million pounds for him. So there's obviously a big part of Mikel Arteta that thinks they need support in wider areas. But it's quite interesting that Gakpo is evolving into a more central presence now, right? So kind of becoming the inverse of that need. We've seen him play through the middle really effectively, or as a second striker when Xavi Simons isn't there for PSV this season. So if someone like Arsenal did move for him, interesting, but might hinder his development, like you said, because not a lot of minutes available in that forward line. So I'd actually like to see one of the chasing pack from the Premier League go for him. I did want Leicester to go for him because they've needed to upgrade that right-hand side for ages, but he's become more of, like I said, a central/left-sided presence, so maybe that isn't quite the ticket. So maybe Team AFD back at home will have to kind of put 2 and 2 together for us in the comments and hit us up.
Love it, love it. I'm sure they'll find the perfect destination for him. Guys, that was Netherlands versus Senegal reviewed. Stay tuned on Football Daily later. We're waiting to the end of the Wales-USA game to give you some tidbits from that about how England can improve potentially, or maybe change their lineup ahead of that game against USA on Friday. I hope you guys enjoyed Continental Club Extra, our first edition of this year's World Cup. Let us know what you made of it in the comments, and we'll catch you later. Bye.